Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm your co-host, John Mickton at the International Schools Podcast. Nice to be back. One of the things that I think we have not done over many, many episodes, during COVID, we did something about well-being. We did have Dr. Helen Kelly here who talked about burnout and well-being, especially for school leaders and teachers. But one of the things we realized is we really haven't done much about this whole topic of counseling, well-being, especially in the context of a school. And there can be counseling also outside of a school context. Families get family counselors, couples have counselors, for marriage counselors. There are a lot of different ecosystems out there where you can get some type of resource where you can talk to somebody, get some input, have somebody listen, maybe coach you through some challenging times or coach you through some decisions. And those are very invaluable times. In a school setting, this is also very important because, of course, teachers do a lot of pastoral care in the context of their maybe a homeroom, or if they're a mentor, or even as a coach, or even as a classroom teacher, a subject teacher, there's always going to be interpersonal well-being matters that are going to creep up. And of course, educators always engage in there to support and make sure the student feels safe and heard. But one of the things that often happens is this becomes maybe bigger, the issue gets amplified, and then you have to tap into your counseling team. It might be a school psychologist, you might have counselors, it could be an assistant principal, a principal. There are various different permutations, but this becomes a really important part, especially for international schools and schools in general, where often there's transients, parents have different things that happen to them, the world outside impacts families, etc. So having that person that you can tap into, that resource that's there, that you can have some confidence, you can talk confidentially, it's going to be safe, and they're going to be willing to listen. And more importantly, they really have the skill set and the knowledge in their background and their experience to really bring the tools and the strategies that really might move you away from the situation that you are or enhance the situation that you're in. So today I'm very excited because we have Brooke Fezler, who is the co-founder and co-director of the International School Counseling Association. And again, remember, show notes pop over there because Brooke has put some great resources, and I really recommend that you look at some of their standards, and we'll talk about that, and also their blog. These are all things that you're going to want to tap into. Brooke has spent more than 20 years supporting student well-being in international schools across Indonesia, Argentina, France, Brazil, and is currently in Spain. Her work at ISCA focuses on building preventative school-wide course counseling programs with a strong emphasis on SEL, life skills and support system for student, teachers, and families. She's also a co-developer and co-researcher of the International Model for Counseling Programs, which was published in 2011 and then republished in 2022. Brooke is based, as I said, in Barcelona, and is always very busy supporting, creating, working, and developing various programs, professional development, and conferences and keynotes with the association. So, Brooke, a very warm welcome to the International Schools Podcast.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here.
So one of the things I think, we have talked about well-being, it kind of became a la mode during COVID, and post, I think schools have become more intentional about what that looks like. But when you look at students and maybe even teachers, I'll let you decide, what are they showing us they need most from schools through their behavior, friendship, anxiety, and sense of belonging?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's definitely been more attention and focus on since COVID. I think a greater awareness of the complexities. And I think what kids are showing us, I mean, there's definitely been an increase in challenges with behavior management, anxiety. Kids are really uncertain about their future, especially those who are in high school and moving on to university. What is AI going to do? What is this world that I'm coming into? And I think post-COVID, and even what's happening now, throughout the Middle East, is what we are seeing is that kids are showing us they need connection. They need trusted adults. They need a community. They need care, and that they need the skills to help them navigate this uncertain world that they're going into. So I think they've shown us that, right? They need help with, emotion regulation. And that has become more of a focus for our teachers, counselors, and administrators to really talk about what are the skills that are going to help our students manage their emotions, because they are a bit exacerbated, right? They don't know what they're feeling, but they're showing us something, and they need to manage that. So yeah, I think they're really, what we've really seen is connection and care is critical. And when we see our schools, having to like close down or go online, I think we really see how that has impacted us as individuals, the community, just the ache and the pain and the anxiety that that's created. So I know, schools in the Middle East right now, right? Many of them have been on and offline, in person. Students haven't been able to return back to school for various, reasons. And it's really highlighting again that need for connection.
Yeah. One of the things I'm wondering, because I think it's so interesting, you talking about this idea of connection and care and some of the behavior, regulation. Do you think this is also amplified maybe because in the home context, parents are feeling the same? So they're modeling that. And I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose, but maybe they're feeling those things and kids see it. And then that kind of amplifies or it has a domino effect.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Definitely.
do you think that one of the things that schools, you talked about this idea of skills and having programs, why can then sometimes this well-being work still feel scattered in schools, even when teachers care deeply and many good supports are in place, but maybe they're not systematic? Why does it sometimes feel scattered and not yet kind of systematic or across as an arc where you see it everywhere?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a lot of the work that we're doing right now with schools, is because it is scattered, it's fragmented, it's happening in some classrooms, it's happening in some divisions. I think why that's happening is because we're not spending enough time having the foundational conversations and quality conversations that we need to have about what we mean when we say we want to prioritize well-being or belonging. We're jumping right to, well, what curriculum can we buy? Or what special day can we have? Or what field trip do we need to do? We're jumping quickly to solutions without really pausing and sitting down, forming a team, working with that team and developing a shared vision and having a shared purpose and having these foundational conversations that are really focused on what is it that we mean, what do we mean when we say we want students to be lifelong learners? What does it mean when we say we want students to be well-rounded global citizens? What does that mean? And what are the skills that we need to get there? Instead, I think we're jumping to, we have a problem. We're seeing these behaviors, or, things aren't the way that we want them to be. Well-being is a focus. And we're jumping right from that to kind of piecemeal initiatives that are not getting integrated into the full school, the thread. We're not spending the time to slow down, bring a team together, form a shared vision, and then bring that through the school in an integrated K-12 way. Yeah.
So when you say that and you're saying slow down and really thinking about what does it mean? What are the values and the philosophy and kind of the mission that we engage with? What are some of the stumbling blocks that are because yes, I've been in many schools where they buy programs. Oh, we buy an advisory program. And you buy them off the shelf. They're generally quite good. And, you just deliver it. But I'm hearing you say, hold on, time out. Let's rewind and let's really have this conversation as human beings inside a room, different stakeholders in the school. Why are we not able to do that? What are some of the barriers that you're seeing that schools are preventing themselves or not giving themselves permission to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. What I hear from different leaders, those who are interested in, let's say, improving that aspect of their school, and they'll come in, they'll seek us out, and they'll say, okay, yes, we want this, but here's what's getting in the way. What's getting in the way is time. That's always, right? That's always a
time,
factor.
That is for sure.
Yeah. Getting the right people in the room. So, big school or a small school, I think the challenge is getting everyone together in the room. And then even before that, it's everyone's coming at this work and has a very different idea of what we mean when we say well-being. And so the idea of maybe pausing maybe an initiative or a system that you have going in your division to step away and say, let's talk about what this looks like K-12 can be a barrier. So I think, we all come to our international schools from different cultures, trainings, experiences, belief systems, our professional, beliefs, and it can be hard to come together, give space to be open to having a conversation and thinking of a shared purpose to come together. So that's one of the things that I see is getting in the way. You'll have a few folks who are ready to go, and then others who are not on board. And it takes a while to get the team on board, even just to come to that first meeting. So even if we've got the time, getting to that first conversation can be hard.
And I think your point's an important one when you're really, as you're stating, is it should be a really K-12 view and thinking of it more as an arc and not an isolated silos throughout the school. And that in itself, sometimes getting everybody to come together. And the other issue often is what a primary school teacher might think is essential as well-being will be very different from a mentor that has a bunch of 16-year-olds. And I think, finding that commonality can be so changing. I think that the time issue you bring is so important. At the same time, if we think of the role of schools as you think pre-COVID, and you talked about what has changed and this idea of connection and care and these issues of behavior, what is really changing for schools? How are they changing because of this change? What are you noticing schools are doing differently?
Well, they're certainly making a very strong effort and a priority on trying to get this well-being, belonging thing right. I've seen a lot more prioritization of, like you mentioned, advisory programs. So, and a focus on tier 1 support. So we're looking a lot at MTSS. We're looking at
Brooke, can you tell us a bit, because for some of our audience, they might not know what MTSS is and the tier 1. I think just if you can break that down, because I think it's a very important aspect of what you're sharing.
Sure. Yeah. So multi-tiered systems of support is MTSS. And if you've got a triangle, and if you've got the bottom of the triangle kind of capturing all the students, what kind of support do we want to make sure all students have? that's kind of tier one, right? So what is standard for all students with our, for example, our advisory lessons, our curriculum, our core values, our behavior agreements, things like that, that apply to all students. And, you know, for the most part, tier one support will address most of the behavior, the emotion, the academic needs and support of students. And then there are those that go up into kind of tier two that are requiring additional support. And that could be, again, academic, social emotional. And then we would be looking at what are the services at the school with our EAL program and team, with our learning support, with our counselors, depending on the need of the student, what kind of support does that child need in order to be successful. And then tier three are students who require more focused, additional, more intentional support. And that tier three, you know, it's at the top of the triangle. It's making up a smaller percentage of the overall population. However, it might require the most amount of time from the team, right? So what I think is happening is a recognition that tier one, having strong tier one systems, having strong value statements, having strong curriculum, having strong programming in the school, all the things that really make well-being a system and not just a lesson or a curriculum is what is going to make the shift for schools. And that base has to be really, really strong in order to support all the students. And there are always going to be those that are going to require short-term and sometimes more long-term tier two and tier three support. But we have to get tier one right. And one of the things I'm noticing in terms of a focus for schools is a lot of schools are recognizing, because I think of the increase of students who are requiring more counseling services, mental health issues, greater learning needs, you know, particularly during COVID, you know, we've had some more gaps in our skill development. We need more reinforcement. That in that time, we need more support at the tier one level. We need all our teachers. We need everyone in the school building to be part of that tier one support. It is not just the learning support department's responsibility to scaffold, you know, the lessons, right? We all need to be able to do that. So I'm seeing more of a focus of schools asking, how do we get more teachers to be the trusted adult for students so that they are the first point of contact instead of jumping right to the tier two or tier three support? And so what are the skills that the teachers need to be able to have those conversations with kids or recognize those behaviors or gaps?
I think that's a really interesting creative tension, because so often when you are a teacher and you have 24 kids or whatever, and you have some behavior problems, your trigger is, oh, let's send them to the counselor.
Right.
And so then there's a long line at the counselor's door, or it's a revolving door of maybe things that are what I'm going to say low-hanging fruit, not to demean any child's problems. But I think your point's a really important one. And I think sometimes that is one of the issues, is there are many things, unfortunately now, or fortunately, that teachers have to take on. And maybe the scope is wider than sometimes they anticipate. Or there's not the professional development. So you need to take care of the behavior. Don't pass the buck to the assistant principal or the counselor, but then they're not the tools or the strategies or the systems. And I think your point's a really important one, is that tier one's kind of a non-negotiable. Everybody needs to be part of it. Everybody needs to be trained. So in the background, of course, you have your counselors, your school psychologists. What are they carrying right now? What do they wish teachers, parents, and leaders understood better about this work, because they're the ones that kind of at the front line of well-being.
Mhm.
Not that it's a trench warfare or anything, but I think they tend to be the people that you lean in on when you have those problems, maybe even more when you're in this, as you described, tier 2 and 3. What are they carrying? What are the things that are on their shoulders? And they're saying, I just wish these people would know this.
Right. Yes. One thing I would say that counselors always want, and that we need, and that we work towards, is understanding of the role clarity, what a counselor does, and how we do it. And what happens is, again, because we have different people have different experiences, cultures, trainings, etc., everyone also has kind of different experiences and ideas about what a counselor does. And so our work in schools is to help people understand the role of the counselor. And sometimes it could be hard to have the space or the time or the platform to be able to share that. And so it's in these little bits and pieces. And sometimes it'll be in the hallway and they'll say, well, look, I need you to take this student. And you say, well, actually, like, I've got, a class that I'm running over here. I'm doing this SEL lesson. And they're like, what? Why are you doing that? And so it's because we do a lot of things. So I think what we carry is, there's frustration because people don't understand the role. And so we're asked to do things that we shouldn't be asked to do, right? That take us away from our primary task and the real big priorities that are going to make an impact. And those are things like, we're supporting kids who are in crisis, right? We're consulting with teachers and parents and outside professionals and providers. We're responding to safeguarding concerns, right? We're helping schools to think proactively, again, in that tier 1 level, about student well-being. And we're helping to try, and when we talk about building preventative, comprehensive counseling programs, it is about building a program. So we like to say that it's about building a program, and it's not about the person. So if I leave a school, when I leave a school, the counseling program, those main pillars stay even though I have left. And that's just like a math program, right? The math teacher leaves, the math program stays, and then someone else kind of comes in and does their craft. So for certain, the number one thing I think counselors wish, especially their administrators, and let's say team leaders that they work closely with, and teachers, is what is their role? What is a kind of appropriate and recommended for a counselor to do, and what really falls outside of that or is on the line that can often compromise the relationship with the student. And yeah, and the other thing I would say is that counselors and leadership really need to be part of the conversation around well-being in the school system. Sometimes it's hard to get a seat at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. You have alluded a couple times to this idea of culture and people from different cultures. And international schools, we have multitude of different cultures that have different perspective on counseling. And I have heard people say, oh, this counseling thing is an American thing, or it's a North American thing. And in our country, we don't have counselors. We don't need counselors, or, there are different perspectives. And I think as you were describing, what are the expectations and the role of the counselors, I imagine one of the issues might be also that some schools don't believe in counselors, or feel that counseling or that counselor role is not something that matches with their cultural vision of well-being. Talk to us a bit about that cultural interpretation of counseling and what you see, especially in an international school context, where you have people from different cultures, different countries, different experiences of what well-being and counseling looks like. I'm just curious how you navigate that.
Yeah. It's good that you picked that up. Okay, so I would say culturally, I think there's been a shift. with how people see, how certain cultures see counseling or therapy. I would say early in my career, when I was kind of working in Asia and Latin America, there was a lot more resistance with certain communities around seeking counseling support. There was a lot of shame around it. There was a lot of defensiveness around it. My child doesn't need to see a counselor. And I do think post-COVID, that has softened a bit. There is more conversation and more awareness around the mental health needs of young people. And there's not that same barrier that there's been in, I'll say, like family cultures or things like that I would come up against with parents. I think there can be, so that's really positive. I think, something good that's come out of COVID is this new acceptance of seeking help, talking to other people about things that are difficult. And, certainly we've seen what that looks like on social media when people are talking about the things that they're feeling. It's been normalized. And so I think some of those ingrained beliefs have changed overall. I do think that there are some, that being said, there are also different ways in which schools or leaders can see the role of the counselor. So some people who have not worked with a counselor before, maybe they've been in a British system and where that is a very different model. And it's a model where actually the counselor just purely does more counseling, does that one-on-one individual support, is less part of the curriculum piece, is less part of kind of developing the other parts of the program and system. And they're more there as, more as a therapist than a traditional role as a school counselor. Now, I've done this work for a long time. I've been going to a lot of different countries. We have people who come to our trainings that are about creating a comprehensive school counseling program, and they all come from different backgrounds, experiences, and trainings. And what's great about this is we develop a shared understanding of what the role of the counselor is. So that's what, when Cheryl and I created this this framework based on the American School Counseling Association, it was to give all of our everyone in our profession a common language and a common understanding of what that role is. Once people understand what that role is and have that experience, do the reading, have the conversations, we're all on the same page. There's really very little division that exists after we've shared the framework. I do think that, again, people's experiences with having worked with a counselor or worked in certain systems where they haven't been integral into the school is where there can be more of the rub or more resistance to that partnership because they just don't know what they do. They don't necessarily see us as a partner, right? They see us as like a different department that you refer kids to, but not as a team member as part of your kind of leadership team. And that is where I think, we don't work efficiently, is when the counselors aren't able to collaborate effectively with their school leaders and the leadership team to be really effective. And so, again, that's the school culture, that's experience. A lot of different factors that contribute to that.
But I think it's important, and you've said this multiple times, is this idea of making sure that different people are at the table. And of course, leadership needs to invite counselors at the same table, because that's really, if you're talking about a systematic change or an arc and a program, as you mentioned, the frameworks that you've worked on, then it really, at the end of the day, becomes a leadership choice. Right? The counselor is not going to implement a program without having the blessing or the collaboration of a leadership team. So I think so often, as you said, the right people have to be around that table. And I think it's really clear that through what you've shared, that is almost, it sounds like a non-negotiable.
It makes the work of building well-being in schools a lot easier.
Yeah, and that's what we want.
Right.
Yeah.
And schools that do that well and partner well with their counseling team are stronger and are able to do more. And there's a lot of schools who are doing that well. There's a lot of school leaders who get it and who work well and understand the role and protect the role to do the right, so that the counselors can focus their time where they need to. And that is such a great model for being efficient. And those schools tend to have stronger well-being programs.
Yeah, I imagine that. So one of the things that if we think of the context, and actually even in a professional non-school setting, we are in a transient world and people move. Sometimes they get to choose, sometimes they don't. Kids tend to move, but they have very little say. Having moved my children 6 times, I know sometimes there was what we assumed was input and feedback, but often it is the profession. And so this moving thing becomes an important part. And we had Ruth from the Third Culture Kids here many years ago that talked a lot about that. I'm wondering, as a counselor, you not only have to support the families that are moving, but I assume there's also a component about the kids that aren't moving and the families that aren't moving. Oh, you are, okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of, so Ruth Van Raken's book and her work in this field have been so valuable to all of us. And exactly. So it's the kids who are leaving and it's the kids who are staying. And I think that one of the things that, again, systemically, what we want to do in our schools is have these programs where we are teaching the skills to the young people about how to navigate transitions. And so becoming really intentional about what are the skills that our kids need who are moving and what are the skills that are for the kids who are staying, right? They've lost their best friend. Their friend has moved. How do they cope with that? We have to teach those skills about how to navigate transition. And, we're lucky because we've got Ruth Van Raken's book. We've got a lot of work in the field. We've got SPAN. We've got TCK training. We've got CIS. We've got a lot of organizations who are doing great work to help us understand the complexity of transitions.
So one of the things is through that transition, do you also think of transition when kids move from one section to another, or maybe there's a bilingual stream? As you talk about transitions and the skills that you want to give them, these are skills that kind of transcend any type of transition, or are they specific to physically moving to a new culture or staying as somebody else moves?
I think it crosses all, right? So it's moving, it's within and between divisions. So as a middle school counselor, I was always in transitions, right? The 5th to 6th transition, the 8 to 9 transition. It was just what I did all the time. I was always having groups of different varieties of a different type of transition. And then it's for the kids who are staying. Now, unfortunately, I would say that that's not something I particularly, I think, did well, was focusing on the kids who are staying. I think we missed that group more than we should. That's where, again, that tier 1 support comes in. Like, maybe we don't need small groups for those students who are staying and who have left their friends, but we need to have that as part of the curriculum, part of the classroom, as a way to process and understand all the different dynamics that are happening when our friends move, or
Yeah.
when we're going from 5th to 6th grade and our relationships change.
Yeah. I know that in my case, because usually staff members stay longer in a school, that many of the friends that my children had, it was kind of a revolving door. And what I think they start realizing was like, I better pick a friend that's going to stay. So I'm going to pick a local kid or something like that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Especially
And,
after they've experienced a lot of loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ruth Van Raken really highlighted that she would say an area of growth or, positive reinforcement would be to remember that balance as we kind of tip to the kids leaving. There's the leaving book, and really kind of rebalance that. As you talk, you keep mentioning to the frameworks and also the systems. Why is a framework so important? And is it a frame? I mean, you guys have a framework and it's in the show notes, so go and look. But what does a framework really help a school as they create those systems? Because a lot of schools will say, well, we'll just buy a program. That's a framework.
Right. Yeah. Right. A framework gives us a focus and it gives us direction. It's not prescriptive, right? So like, for example, we have a counseling program framework. It gives the structures and it gives boundaries, but it is not prescriptive. It doesn't tell you exactly what every day is going to look like, but it gives us some guardrails, and that helps us stay focused on our primary responsibilities, so that we don't get pulled into a million different things that take us away from our core focus, which is on supporting students' mental health and well-being, right? It is very easy, especially in a role like a counselor, to get pulled into a lot of different areas. So a framework helps us keep focused. The other kind of framework I've probably been referring to are the standards, having SEL and life skills standards. If a math program is not working towards standards, what happens? K-12. Chaos. The same is true for SEL and life skills. However, historically, that has not been as understood or as prioritized. We've had these standards since 2011. They've existed prior to that as well with the American model. And then we've revised and added this global perspective and identity development domain to this original set of standards. And if we don't have standards in our schools, if they are not focused on what we're teaching and what skills we want to develop in our young people, it is chaos.
Absolutely. No, I agree. So the framework and standards, I like the way you mentioned the word guardrails, because that feels like it's a gate, but it's not going to come in and basically dictate what you're doing at 8:25 with your mentor group. But as we say, they're not rules, they're tools, right? They're just there to tap into and give you some direction. And I think the standards is really a good point, because we're very good with standards for English and for what I would say the core subjects. But sometimes we're thinking, well, it's not a core subject, so we don't need standards. And I think that's often a big misconception. And I think you highlighted that. One of the things that, as you're talking, and you've mentioned that you've been working in the business for a number of years, and counselors are seeing changes in patterns. Do you think the role of the counselor is changing? If you compare what you did when you did, say, X amount of years before you came out with your certification and had worked in the school counselor, and now you come into a school, what do you think are the big new things that are on the list that maybe people aren't prepared for? Maybe this often happens. These certification programs in education colleges or universities tend not to be as agile and adaptable. Takes more time. And then suddenly you get into a counseling situation. You're like, wow, that I was not ready for.
Right. Yeah. So we, at ISCA, we have also created a certificate program to account for that. Because you come out of your training, you're in the field, and then you're sitting with the students, you're in with parents, and you think, oh, I don't know, I didn't get the training for this, or I don't know how to manage this, or wow, we have a lot of students with anxiety. I really need to get strong in understanding how to help them through this. So yeah, so with the design of our certificate program, we looked at, well, what are all those things? What are all those gaps? What is that information that that people are lacking, right? Or that training that needs to be constantly reviewed and kept on top of. Certainly, there's been a big focus on mental health. So one of our specializations in our certificate program is a mental health specialization. And we see a huge amount of interest in that. So there's a series of, I think it's 9 courses that we have focused on mental health. Our graduate programs, and I work in a graduate program, they're great for a lot of that foundational work. And then it's when we get into the chair and we're working with students and we're like, oh my gosh, you're constantly experiencing situations that you have not confronted before.
Yeah.
And you're constantly looking for resources and training and understanding, how do I support this family navigating this situation? So we hear that a lot. We have tried to, so we have, webinars and courses that are constantly responding to the growing needs. And I would say most of those have been in the area of mental health.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we have facing us is that you have these large language models, and you have the counseling one, you have the psychiatrist one, you have the psychologist one. And I have heard some students say, yeah, my counselor's always busy, and actually I don't really like them because I don't feel they understand me, but I love the large language model that I'm interacting with, and it's always available. Like at 2 a.m. when I'm having an anxiety attack, guess what? It's there. I get my phone. Just wondering, not that this is competition for you, but how are you addressing that? Or even a counselor that might be saying, I don't have time to do that course. Let me get onto ChatGPT or Claude and see. And even though the large language models will always say, you should see a health professional, blah, 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 we tend to take it and are quite comfortable using that. So how are you navigating this as an organization and also in a school setting? What's the message? Because it obviously is, I don't know if it's working because I haven't tried it, but a lot of people are doing it. People have AI girlfriends and boyfriends, they're in relationships. Just curious where your organization, where are you placing yourself in that narrative?
Yeah. Yes, it's so complicated. And I think as an organization, this next school year, we are doing a lot more to support counselors with the counseling aspect of AI, and understanding what are the frameworks that we can that we need to be aware of, so that we can help students who are engaging with AI as a companion, and how can we help them understand that the different ways that these tools interact with them, so that they are informed and that they are also seeking support with humans. And so so we have a lot on the schedule for this next school year because we're seeing a lot more come up. So some of the things that are coming up is, one, yes, students seeking it as a companion. We're also seeing families and students who want to record sessions. So then we have conversations that we need to be having around confidentiality and consent. People are recording their conversations with their doctors and or in therapy sessions. Therapists are recording it, and then an AI report is going back to the patient with a summary and next steps and some additional resources and tools. So this is so new. And I think, we've really been focused on how is it impacting the students at the systems level, with students with, cheating, and can they use AI, and what are our policies? We've been there. And I don't know that we've been focusing on how it's impacting our own field exactly in this way, in terms of like companionship, and how do we need to guide students with this emotional piece of it. So we've got a number of webinars. We have a pre-conference coming up on it. We have tools that we're working with other experts on who are doing that work right now, and having conversations with them, because it's kind of new in that regard. That aspect of it is new. We're seeing how it's infiltrating our work, and how we need to help prepare students for it, and also protect ourselves in the certain aspects of it as well. Like I mentioned, recording or seeking it out instead of a counselor.
So Brooke, I'm going to give you a scenario. This
Okay.
is a third grader, and she came up to me. So when I work with kids, one thing I always ask is how many of them have a home intelligent device. It could be their Samsung TV, it could be the refrigerator, it could be the robot, it could be Alexa, it could be Google Home, whatever it is. And so usually I get, I would say between 60 and 70% of the kids under 7 are usually interacting with one of those type of devices, partly because they're also in a socioeconomic situation where it's much easier to purchase those. And so one of the girls says to me, I love Alexa. She's always there. She's never upset. She always answers my questions. And whenever I need her, she's there for me. Now, of course, this girl lives in a lovely family, wonderful parents. They're both working. Mom comes home, dad comes home. They're cooking, they're doing laundry, the dog needs to be walked. Oh, the dryer's broken, etc., etc. And, this young lady is trying to get some attention, and the attention is there, but it's broken. And suddenly Alexa's there 100% for her. What do you tell a kid?
What would I tell them if I were you in that situation?
Yeah, we did a whole lesson about it, but I'm just curious.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious what, when you hear that as a counselor and you start seeing a pattern of that happen over multiple children, what is the message to the parents as a counselor? What would your organization would want people to, it's not a red flag, but you'd be like, okay, we're going to spend a little time focusing on this issue.
Right. Yeah, that's a good example. That's a really good example that concerns me. I guess I would lean into the conversation around, normalizing our emotions and our relationships, and that, Alexa is always there. It is the feeling, and that's where she wants to go to because her parents aren't available, to her, or doesn't have a sibling or something like that, right? But to understand that it's great to have those tools, but we can't rely on that for our connection with others, and that we have to normalize that Alexa is not a human, and that humans are complex and have responsibilities and have emotions, and we need to be better. If she has a need, I guess the growing need is like she's feeling alone or isolated. So I would want to have a conversation with the parents around, I had this conversation with your daughter. She said she's spending a lot more time with Alexa. This is a red flag. You might need to turn away from, the cooking, the responsibilities, the other things, and spend some time with your daughter so that she doesn't become dependent on Alexa to be her companion.
Yeah,
and
it comes to your point.
In that.
It comes to your point at the beginning, this idea of connection and care, right? This is what kids want. They want connection and care. Now, if an inorganic machine is able to give connection and care, then that's a bigger question. What does connection and care look like when a
Right.
human gives it and when a machine gives it. And I think, you know,
Right.
you've done such a wonderful job making sure we understand that connection and care is kind of the non-negotiable. And you know, I put you on the spot here with this question, I know, but I am seeing much more of that. And I have adult
Hmm.
children who
Yeah.
periodically will do that. And, you know, I have been in challenging professional situations. I've had somebody to talk. So I write the
Yeah.
context, I write the situation, and I go to a large language model and I say, I want you to be my critical friend. I want
Hmm.
you to challenge me in what I'm doing. But guess what? It's pretty good what comes out. And I'm
Right.
like, wow, okay. So
Right.
I don't think we're going to solve it today, but I'm
Right.
just always curious as counselors, as you've been very upfront that this is something that your organization is going to be focused on, that this is something that's important. But I
Right.
think also as you navigate, are you seeing more of that? I mean, are you noticing it yourself when you talk to your network? And is AI becoming like a subtopic of the bigger topic?
It is. Yep. It is. And it is, yeah, which is why, again, you know, we try to be ahead and responsive to the needs that are coming up. And this is definitely coming up. I think, uh, you know, and this again goes to the SEL and life skills development, right? So you as an adult, as a fully grown adult, right, with a fully formed prefrontal cortex, have more self-awareness. Like, great, this model has given me this response and I feel this way, but I also am aware that I have a different sensation and feeling when I'm engaging with, you know, these humans. I think that this is why it's so important to do SEL well, so social
Yes.
emotional learning, because we have to strengthen and make sure that our social and self-awareness is heightened.
Yep.
And we have to be specific about what are those skills that help us to identify when an AI is creating a certain kind of connection, what kind of connection that is, and what is the formula that is bringing us into, you know, these tools and keeping us there, and be able to disconnect and be aware that, oh, this is taking me into another world. This is actually not healthy for me, or I need to pull out of this and go and speak to my friends because that's going to give me a different kind of feeling and sensation and connection, a different connection. So we really have to focus and zoom in on what are those skills. And this is that conversation, right?
Yep.
This is that conversation we need to have with the whole school. So if AI is becoming a problem and our kids are using AI as a companion, what are the skills that we need to teach them? And what are the learning experiences that we need to have so they learn that skill to be able to make that connection about this feeling that they have and they get from using AI versus that human connection?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you
Um,
think that conversation in the SEL skills, do you think there's an age limit or do you start with the 3-year-olds?
that's a good question. Yeah, you know, I mean, I've got two young kids, 9 and 8. Um, they see that I use AI to support my work. We don't have these tools. I think everyone's exposure is really different. You
Yeah,
know,
of
my
course.
my husband doesn't even have a phone still. So there's not a lot of tech around. Like, we're a pretty low tech home. They don't see a lot of AI in our family, but then there's others that are going to have a lot of exposure to it. So gosh, I think we probably do have to start having those conversations a little bit earlier. However, you know, then are we exposing them to this thing that they don't need to be exposed to yet?
Yeah,
Are they
that's a
using,
because you go into homes and you see Alexa there, and there are little toddlers, and there's the dog, and there's
right?
everybody. And, you know, I've been in situations where Alexa
Yeah.
just feels like part of the family, right? Whenever you have a question or you want new music or whatever, you
Right.
just default. And so little kids are watching this and they're thinking,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to ask it to do something. So it's,
Yeah.
we're not going to answer that today, but it's just interesting to see where we are. We're coming
Yeah.
to the end of this wonderful conversation. And one thing I would like to ask you is, what do you want teachers and leaders and just people in general, what is a counselor not? What is something people have to stop thinking a counselor is when they're not that?
Okay. Well, a counselor is not a magician.
Okay.
That, the child that is difficult or that is struggling, they won't come to our office. I don't have a magic wand, and they're not going to come out, fixed, right? That it is a process, and humans are complex, and these things take time. And so the same is true for the work of a counselor with a child or with a family. So recognizing that the counseling work is a process, and that by sending the child to the counselor is a great support, and that's a partnership, that involves the teacher and the counselor and the student and the family and all the other people who are around that child. But we alone are not magicians to be able to kind of fix the situation that is coming up. And so that needs time, and that really needs partnership.
Yeah, and I think those two words are key, as you've brought this up multiple times, is time, and something that we don't like because we don't have enough of it or we want more of it, but also that it's a shared ownership. The counselor can't just be in that room doing it solo. And, the kid comes out, as you said, is fixed and ready to go. And that
Right.
idea of a process, sometimes people tend to be impatient, right? They want things to go fast. And I think, your point's a really important one, is that this takes time. And as you said, very truly, people are complex, situations are complex, and that time is really important. So I just want you to, where should people go to your website? Is there something you would want them to first, click on just to get an idea? Or if they want to find out more about this conversation, what would you invite them to consider on your website, which is in the show notes?
Right. Yeah, gosh, there's so many things. I guess it depends on what their priorities are. So for all educators, and particularly with counselors, we have lots of courses that are designed to upskill and support your work in the classroom. So if you go to our academy, you'll find a lot of great courses there. For those who are focusing on Tier 1 and SEL work, I would guide you to our SEL toolkit, which is a set of tools to help. It is not a curriculum. It is a set of tools and kind of like a playbook about how to bring in SEL to a school, K-12, integrated into the system. And and then I guess, foundationally is our model, the counseling framework. And so again, it is a framework. It is not prescriptive, but it helps provide anyone with role clarity, definition for what the job is. And it gives all of us, no matter what our training background experiences are, a shared language to collaborate. Because we are often isolated as counselors. There might be one of us in a school or one of us in a division, but we are all connected. And ISCA is that connection for people, and the resources are there. But the framework and operating by this framework really helps us to be working towards and building toward the same thing. Because the reality is our families and us, we're moving across schools.
Exactly.
And so we need to provide some consistency in our care.
Yeah.
And that is essential, right?
Yeah.
To making those smooth transitions like you talked about before. You know what you're going to get when you move schools and you're going to a new math program,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
same should be for kind of a counseling program.
Absolutely. So I just want to remind people, do go to the ISCA website, and you have a lot of links in the show notes. Brooke's LinkedIn and contact is there. So if you want to reach out and maybe participate in a workshop, or you have questions, or your school would like to have a conversation. And as I always say, what we do in schools is not exclusive to schools. In a workplace, you might want also some well-being frameworks. Those transcend just being in a school. Brooke, thank you so much. And again, our audience, thank you for the wonderful suggestions. It's really helpful and great when people say, hey, you never talked about this, etc. So we really appreciate the interactivity. The LinkedIn group, of course, is the best place to reach Dan and I. That's where we kind of keep tabs on things. And of course, if you like conversations like this, make sure you like our podcast on the many ecosystems. And just for a timestamp, you're going to be hearing this in the middle end of the summer. So this is a perfect time as you go back into school to engage in that conversation, because you have all this wonderful advice that Brooke just shared and these perspectives that I really appreciate you sharing today, Brooke. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.